and welcome to The Resource, the podcast propelling employer brands to recruit smarter and retain better. I'm your host, Priscilla Peters.
And I'm your other host, Scott Dismuke. We're certainly glad that you're joining us again. Priscilla, we've now made it a few episodes. Nobody's canceled us still. We're still chugging along, right?
Yes. Listen, I'm still on a high from the last one when we interviewed Clarissa Rankin. That was everything and more. Like she and I, we've been DMing each other. We've been chatting it up. I feel like we're basically sisters now, she and I.
Well, listen, you guys certainly had a lot in common that you were talking about. Your dinners together. I mean, I was more observed by actually my wife listened to it and she was like, "So are you going to say anything?" I'm like, "No, I'm just going to let Priscilla and Clarissa go. We're going to let them carry this episode because they're going to be far more entertaining than I am."
Yes. Well, but on this episode, we have another great guest. So here we are. Like we're on a roll. I feel like we're on a roll.
We are on a roll. I think, we got people knocking down our doors, right? I mean, calling us left and right saying, "Can we be on the resource? Can we be on the resource?" So, we'll just let it roll and everybody's just going to have to take a number and wait their turn. And I'm excited. I'm excited about what we got coming down the pipe. I'm excited about this episode and kind of hearing from a policy standpoint and, certain things that companies are doing or carriers are doing at a state level. I'm super excited about today's episode for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Okay. So, we always start with our guest asking the first 5 serious questions that seriously don't matter. So what about we throw one at each other today?
I think it's only fair that if we're asking these somewhat silly questions to the people that have graciously come on the show, that we should have to do the same thing. So why don't you, do you want me to start or do you want to start?
You start.
Okay.
We'll let you start.
So I think I want to know this time, and we'll get to the other questions in the future episodes. I think I want to know what your favorite movie is.
Oh, okay. So I have 2. And one of our guests has said one of these, so I'm not stealing it, just for the record, okay? It really is a favorite movie. But my first one, like all-time favorite, probably of all time, is When Harry Met Sally. I just love it so much. It's like, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. Like, young folks, go. That was like the traditional perfect rom-com, and they had the scenes with the couples that just broke in the middle of, it was just everything. Rob Reiner was a Rob Reiner film. Like, where's Rob Reiner of today? Like, there's no good, I don't know. But that's my favorite one, yeah.
I have to admit, and you may no longer respect me, but I have never seen When Harry Met Sally all the way through. Never have.
Okay, well, that's a problem, and you need to fix that this weekend, okay?
I don't know if it'll be this weekend, but it's football season. I'm not going to, I can't interrupt football.
You're right.
But yeah.
Hang on, because I do have 2, because like that's the feel good side, but Shawshank Redemption, like you can't beat. Like just good all around movie. Like you can't beat that one. So that's the one. I think Clarissa said that one too. One of our other guests had mentioned that one.
Yeah. I think it was Clarissa. Yeah, you're right.
What's yours? Your favorite movie?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a warped sense of humor.
No,
I know.
Shocker.
I call it a warped sense of humor. My wife calls it potty humor. I have always loved the original Dumb and Dumber.
Really?
Yeah. I would probably be somewhat embarrassing if I told you. Now, you have to remember, when that came out, I was like 20, 21. It was embarrassing probably how many times that I went to the theater to see that movie. And there's a certain scene in that movie. I think we all know what it is. If you've seen the movie, it's Jeff Daniels. I'll just leave it at that. Mm-hmm. Every single time I went and saw that movie, I laughed till I cried in that scene. So that's kind of, but kind of going back and kind of my silly dad humor that my son gets irritated at me for doing. Probably one of my other favorite movies is The Three Amigos with Chevy Chase. and Steve Martin and Martin Short.
I mean, the
Listen,
cinematic masterpieces that you're choosing.
yes.
I did
Listen,
not see that coming, Scott. That's not what I expected at
what
all.
did you expect something like
I expected like,
real thought provoking or what?
yeah, like some like political, the American president or some movie like
No,
that. No?
you watch movies to escape all that crap.
Well, that's
You
true.
know,
That's true.
so
That's true.
yeah, if I had to pick a serious movie, good lord, I don't see, my mind doesn't even go there. So, but I do love Shawshank. I do love Shawshank.
It's good.
But like from a political standpoint, I loved Primary Colors with John Travolta. That was based on the book. That was actually loosely based on Bill Clinton. I did love Primary Colors. It probably wasn't one of my favorites,
I don't think I
but
saw that. I haven't seen that.
yeah, it was good. John Travolta was kind of the Bill Clinton Southern governor running for president, and so yeah, it was good. But I'm a silly potty humor. I like Star Wars movies. So I'm kind of a nerd in that. But
That doesn't surprise me. The Star Wars doesn't surprise me. But the Dumb and Dumber and the Three Amigos, I did not see that coming.
listen, I could quote you so many lines from the Three Amigos, but I won't because it's supposed to be a clean podcast. So, but there's so many lines that during COVID, I know we're talking about this way too much, and there's more important things here. But during COVID, I made my wife and my mother-in-law watch Three Amigos, and I'm pretty sure they lost a lot of respect for me after that. So I've been trying to gain that back ever since.
Okay, that's Steve Martin, Martin Short,
and Chevy Chase.
Chevy Chase. I couldn't remember the third.
Yes.
I do love me some Chevy Chase. That dude is yeah.
Vacation movies, Fletch, all of those. Just
Fletch
fantastic.
is classic. I love Fletch. Okay, so we got to dig into our guest. We got to ask our guest the first five.
Ask the first five, and hopefully she'll be a lot more serious than we'll be.
Yeah. You ready to get started?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Well, Scott, today we have a fabulous guest joining us. Today's guest was named president of the Arkansas Trucking Association in June of 2014. She's been with ATA since 2003, having previously served as vice president and in all kinds of different roles. In 2018, she was recognized by the American Trucking Associations with the President's Trucking Association Executives Council Leadership Award. That is a really, really big deal, by the way. For her regional and national advocacy efforts, she's been involved in various statewide transportation campaigns for the governors of Arkansas. She currently serves as chair of her peer group, the Trucking Association's Executive Council. She holds a number of industry leadership positions in all kinds of various organizations. She lives here in Central Arkansas, where I also live, with her husband Josh and their two children, Nash and Nyla. Please welcome to the show the president of the Arkansas Trucking Association, Shannon Newton. Thanks for joining us, Shannon. We're so excited to get to pick your brain and talk to you about all the things.
Thank you so much, Priscilla and Scott, for having me. I promise not to say anything about all those long intro and accomplishments and places I've been and positions I've held. I look forward to visiting with you about retention and recruiting issues of today.
That's awesome. Well, Shannon, we really, really appreciate your time today. I know you got a lot going on, so for you to cut out a few minutes for us today really means a lot. I told Priscilla earlier that I certainly feel like a thorn amongst roses today. So really appreciate you joining us. So we always get kicked off with what we call the first five, and these are serious questions that seriously do not matter, just to have a little fun and maybe get to know you a little bit better. So first question of our first five. In your opinion, what is the best sandwich?
Oh, I'm a turkey cheese, mayonnaise, mustard with potato chips on the sandwich.
With potato chips.
On the sandwich? Mm-hmm. Yes, fantastic. I love that.
I like it. And you go mayonnaise and mustard. Like you're not, you're like, no, right. We're going both. We're going all in. Correct. I like it. Okay. So tell us, number two, what is your favorite movie?
Oh, this is going to sound so cliche. First of all, to qualify, I'm not a huge movie person. I struggle to sit still for 2 hours. But if you um, said what's your favorite movie, I'm going to say You've Got Mail with Meg Ryan.
That's classic. I love it. You know, I also love, and Scott, I know we talked about this before, but one of my favorite movies is When Harry Met Sally with Meg Ryan.
Yeah, that's
like I love that one. But yeah, I miss Meg Ryan. Like I miss the good old rom-coms. Like what happened?
I was going to say it's very chick flick-ish, but
yes.
All right, Shannon. So, what is the most used app on your phone?
Oh, that's going to be I know you didn't mean for that to be embarrassing, but it probably is. I am a big nerd when it comes to my phone, and I love to play all of the puzzle games. And there's a game called Two Dots, which is just sort of like a little puzzle game, but I play that just about every time that I have it.
If it makes you feel better, I have the same game.
Okay, I did feel a little bit better.
Dots. I've never even heard of that. Two Dots. I'll have to look it up.
It's kind of like a Candy Crush for adults. I mean, it's a similar type of puzzle.
Yeah.
Fun game.
Cool.
You made it sound very sophisticated. I appreciate that. Candy Crush for adults. I've not been accused of that too often, so I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay. We'll roll.
All right. All right. So number 4, what is a talent you have that only those close to you know about?
Do I have to still practice this talent, or just like any sort of talent?
Nah, you don't have to still practice it.
I can read music. So like as a kid, I played the trumpet and the piano and the flute and all sorts of musical things, but I have not upped that talent as my other demands for my time have pushed them out.
Yes. Trumpet, piano. What else did you say?
The flute. I am sounding like a really big nerd here with my computer games and my instruments. It's fine.
No, I love it. I love it. Don't you? So doesn't your daughter, does your daughter dance? I remember us talking before about how we both have dancers.
Yes, my daughter dances, and my son actually plays my trumpet, which is kind of cute.
Oh, very fun. I like it. That's cool. That's fun. All right, we got one more.
All right, Shannon, last question. If you weren't doing what you're doing today, your job, your career, what would you hope to be doing?
When I graduated college, when I went to college, probably be a more accurate statement, I wanted to be the CFO of something. That was really like my career goal. And I grew up in, those who are from Central Arkansas will know, like the car dealership alley of our region. And so I truly thought that I was going to go back home and be the CFO of some car magnet dealership. And that was my goal. And it's still like, I haven't worked in a dealership environment since I was probably 22 or 23. But in my mind, that was where I thought I would have been 20 years ago. Obviously a very different path emerged from my accounting degree.
I bet it comes in handy though. I mean, especially running an organization like you do. Yeah, I'm sure it does.
So did you get kind of roped into trucking kind of like I did? Because my background was not in trucking either. So did you kind of get sucked in, and once you're in, you're in? Is everything everybody told me? He said, well, once you're in trucking, you don't get out. So that's kind of what I have seen. Were you kind of the same way?
Very similar. I mean, I went to school knowing that I was going to get an accounting degree, got an accounting degree, and just happened to go to work at a trucking company in accounting when I graduated college. And that was the beginning. That's when you stepped in the quicksand and you can't get out.
Yeah, we call it Hotel California. You can't ever.
I'm not trying to get out. Well, I guess I should, preface it by saying that I'm not trying to get out. But I didn't. My path to the industry is, no one saw that coming, including me.
Yeah, same. I think we all three can we all agree on that. We all ended up here the same way, but glad we did. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the meat, if you will, and kind of get into some questions. We just wanted to get your insight. We know that you have so much experience in the industry. And so, first of all, congratulations on serving as the 2023-2024 chair of the Trucking Association Executive Council. That is very, very impressive and very, very cool that you have that. I know you said you don't want to talk about all that, but I just want to say, from one Arkansas girl to another.
Yeah, anybody to be recognized by your peers is a cool thing. And so, for those who don't know what that's just like all the State Trucking Association executives have our own little association. And so that is the, 48 or 49 different State Trucking Association executives, and serving as the chair of that group. I do get to serve in a leadership role with Big ATA. And so that to me is really the neatest thing about that experience, is getting to represent my peers in that environment.
Oh, yeah, that's so cool. So you recently celebrated 20 years with the Arkansas Trucking Association. So tell us, what have you learned the most about trucking in these 2 decades? Like, you've kind of been here for a lot of shifts and changes in the industry, but what do you think you've learned the most over those 20 years?
I mean, I think when that question is posed, what immediately comes to my mind is, while the more things change, they kind of stay the same. And when I say that, if I were to, and I have the benefit, I've said, because I've been at the association for 20 years, I have 20 years worth of periodicals, magazines, and art, things that we've been talking about and working on over that time period. And 3 main things, kind of big buckets, stand out in my mind. One is the driver shortage. And I always say, when the economy is good, there's not enough drivers. And when the economy is bad, we have just enough. And it's always one of those two. And so I feel like that issue has superseded and lasted throughout all 21 years that I've been out of college and in the industry. That issue has been at some level on the radar as an industry issue. And then secondly, I'd say infrastructure, just because you think about, that's the place that our industry relies on to do business. That's where we send our employees out. We make promises to our customers based on the reliability and the efficiency of the infrastructure. And there's certainly been a lack of investment and reliability in it over the past 20 years. And so that issue kind of remains constant. There are wins and losses, and it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But infrastructure kind of stays on the list. And then regulation, whether it's under regulation or over regulation, it seems that there's always some movement to do more or less to either help the industry or to provide some sort of constraints on bad behavior within the industry. So those 3 things I kind of think of as overarching over all of the 20 years. If I were to say what's changed the most, I would say the technology. I mean, to me, that is the breakneck pace at which things have really changed. And there's an element of technology that applies to all of those. The technology that we use to address the driver shortage, the technologies that the drivers are using in the cab. I mean, all of those kind of weave together. But those are kind of the big themes that I think of as in an industry advocacy position, of issues that our members are consistently talking about and how they impact their business, and that we have some sort of role in addressing.
Interesting. So you kind of touched on this, and obviously, a lot of the folks that are listening today, kind of in the recruiting retention space. So over the years, whether it's your members or other carriers, how have you seen carriers hold driver recruiting and retention as a priority, and how has that paid off?
I mean, I think you see, again, it kind of comes in cycles. And I think if industry representatives were honest with themselves, that they would agree that whenever there's empty trucks, driver recruiting becomes a very high priority. Whenever there are not empty trucks, it becomes something that everybody's responsible for keeping on the list, but maybe doesn't get the resources or the attention that it would in a different environment. I would say those who have consistently, applied or prioritized driver recruiting tend to do better. It's not to say that they insulate themselves from the ebbs and flows of, empty trucks or seated trucks, but their highs and lows are less dramatic. And they don't have to completely retool every time there's an economic shift. And so I would say, it's paid off in the longevity of their employees. I mean, I can think of a couple of members who've had, people in their recruiting department for 15 or 20 years. And that's probably a little bit of a unique situation. But to me, that demonstrates that there's a consistency of priority, a consistency of their, evolving their own applications and processes, and that they never completely abandoned their efforts to recruit and retain drivers.
So during an economic downturn, kind of like what we're seeing right now with what we've been experiencing with the freight recession, some carriers do make drastic decisions related to recruiting and retention because capacity needs, like you said, are really not at kind of the top of the priority list. So I guess what kind of advice would you give carriers who are experiencing significant freight slowdowns like kind of what we've been going through, particularly in quarter two and even in quarter three, but also know the importance of a healthy driver pipeline and a solid retention program?
Yeah, I would say, I don't want to be insensitive to the economic realities that may or may not exist in a small carrier operation. And so keeping the recruiting department open at the risk of losing the business is certainly, short-sighted and doesn't serve you well to have a recruiting department if you don't have a business. And so, I realize that there are some tough decisions that have to be made during economic downturns. But what I would say is, I think all carriers would acknowledge that there's an importance of a driver pipeline. You think of that as a talent pipeline in any part of your business, whether you're looking at, the future of your safety department or the future of your maintenance department. You're always thinking about, or you should always be thinking about, what does the next set of leaders look like in this particular department? And you can't ignore that when you start talking about, where are my next set of drivers going to come from? So I would, I tend to think about the things that you can do that are not necessarily cost driven, like relationships. Most carriers that are highly involved in recruiting have relationships, whether it be vendor partners or schools or other entities that you're using as your pool for recruiting, to maintain those relationships. Even if you're used to be hiring 6 and now you're only hiring 2, don't let those relationships fade away, even though the demand might not be there right now. Because whenever you go to turn that spigot back on, it's going to flow a lot faster if you've been able to maintain those relationships and keep your company engaged in whatever pockets that you're hoping to pull future employees from.
Yeah, I think we would echo all of that too. And I think it's interesting that you say over the years, you mentioned those that have held priority or recruiting and retention priority. You've seen really sustainability, if you will, from that standpoint. And I think a lot of times people think recruiting is adding drivers, and it's not necessarily just that. It's, making sure that you're still developing this brand preference for your carrier with drivers, even if you're not adding a ton of them today. And so yeah, so much kind of good insight there that we would definitely echo for sure.
Yeah, I think even in this economy, you certainly don't want to leave one of your customers, waiting without a driver to pick up, one of your 6 loads from that particular location today. And if you have a driver, maybe by no fault of your own, goes sick or has an emergency or needs some time off or needs extended, FMLA or what, you're going to want to be in a position in which you have somewhere or someone to call to backfill those vacancies, even in this environment.
Right, exactly. And really setting yourself up for success when it does come back. Those of us long timers in the room, we all know, right, that when it turns pretty quickly and driver needs happen super fast. So, yeah, for sure. So, speaking of old timers, myself, I'll put myself on the top of that list. So you and I have been in the industry about the same time. I'm certainly older than you are. I'm pretty darn sure. But I'm kind of shifting gears a little bit here as we go into these last couple of questions we have for you. But I know for me, and I don't want to speak for you, so I just kind of want to get your insight here. But I know that having a seat at the table in a pretty male dominated industry. I mean, I can remember early on sitting at conference room tables and being the only female in the room. I'm sure you have a lot of experiences like that too. So, what advice would you give to women who are really wanting to grow a career in trucking? Like, what advice? I mean, obviously, you've had a fabulous career in trucking and you've got years ahead of you as well. So, what kind of advice would you have for women in the industry?
Um, so I have a, this will probably be a longer answer than what you had anticipated. So when I first got, whenever I was first named president of the organization, there were, lots of, I'm the first female to be in this position, and there was a lot of headlines. And I'll just say personally, that made me very uncomfortable. Like I shunned being the first female or the, woman of this or whatever. And so I kind of, bristled a little bit at embracing the fact that I was a woman and that perhaps that I was, doing something that hadn't been done before, because I didn't really want to be recognized for being a woman doing it. I just wanted to be recognized for doing it. And so I'm kind of maybe speaking to people who have that mindset of pretending like it's not there, because that's the way that I chose to operate, and it's it served me well in a lot of cases in not being afraid or not shying away from being the only girl at the table. um but I will say, as I became older and wiser, I realized that even though I didn't see that as an issue, that there are so many other women who do, or who can't envision themselves in that role, who can't envision themselves at the table. And so I kind of shifted my mindset a little bit to think that, maybe I do have some responsibility to younger women who didn't have a strong role model as I did, or maybe they didn't have the support system to tell them they could be anything that they wanted to be. And so I just want to share that because I think that's a little bit, it's an insight into me, but also an insight into a lot of the way that women struggle with being um, successful, and like, do I have some sort of guilt associated with being successful? But my advice would be to not try to be somebody that you're not, but to have confidence in who you are, know who you are, know what you're good at, advocate for roles that emphasize what you're good at. And this is a piece of advice that was given to me that didn't really make sense at the time, but looking back, we tend to gravitate to the, like, if you and I had walked into a boardroom together in 2005, we would have gravitated to one another, and we would have sat
Mm-hmm.
together, and then we would have been referred to as the girls. And it would have been
Yeah.
very difficult for either one of us to have any sort of unique identity or idea. Everything would have been attributed to the group of the girls that, sitting at the end of the table. And so as much as it is comfortable to flock together, I think that we are better served to be individuals in that environment.
Yeah. No, I I mean, you hit the nail on the head with that one. I can just tell you because I've kind of taken different approaches in those scenarios. And it's not that we can't depend on each other, and we can't lean on one another and get advice from each other and all of that. But I do think there's something to be said for really kind of standing on your own or being in your own place, if you will, especially in those environments. But no, that's great. So when it comes to women drivers, do you have any thoughts on advice that you would give to carriers on hiring female drivers? I know over the years you've probably encountered hundreds of female drivers, but what do you think is something that carriers should really be thinking about when it comes to hiring women?
I think this may not be a popular answer, but I really think you have to be intentional about recruiting women, because women, for whatever reason, and there's a lot of them that are legitimate, and there may be some that we think are less important, but um, they have perceived objections to the job that is being a professional truck driver. Even if they're themselves are comfortable with it, they've got to overcome the objection of everybody that's in their circle that is going to question them or look at them funny for making that suggestion or leaning into that opportunity. And so I think you have to go ahead and spell out the things, answer the questions that you know they're going to ask without them asking. They want to know, am I going to be safe? Where am I going to go to the bathroom? Where am I going to have a break? Are there other women like me in this, in your company? Is there, will I have the opportunity to have a female manager? Like all of those things that they're going to want to know to normalize what is still a very unusual decision. And even if we go from 7% to 8% or 9% or whatever the total number of female drivers is within the industry, those are modest gains in the grand scheme of things. And so we're going to have to, if we want to materially change that, we're going to have to be very intentional about the way that we do that and provide a pathway that knocks down some of those objections that women and people who pull for those women identify really quickly.
Absolutely. I always ask if a carrier says to me, I need help hiring more female drivers, then I always say, show me the females you have today. Let me see the female drivers you have today, because that's the story you need to tell, is show me successful women at your carrier today, and let's go tell that story. And
They'll be your biggest
them,
advocates.
Sometimes they don't. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We had a female driver on our last episode, and she was, a spitfire. She was a mess.
Yeah.
But it just being able to tell that story is super impactful.
Well, I think we've somewhat normalized, or at least we now have a way that we talk about recruiting young people. And when we talk about recruiting young people, we say, change the hearts and minds of parents, teachers, counselors, and all the people that are in that young person's support system as they're making that decision. And I think you can almost take that a very similar approach and say, okay, if that's the approach for young people, what is the approach for women? Because they have a lot of the same challenges, whether it be a family dynamic or, they have friends and neighbors and parents and siblings who are going to have that same negative projection, or all of the reasons that it won't work or that it shouldn't work, or that it never even crosses their mind as a real opportunity until we put forth the effort to change the conversation.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So I recently read an article that you wrote on the Arkansas Trucking Association's website, and we'll link it in the show notes so everybody can read it, because I loved it so much. And you talked about Taylor Swift and the Eras Tour. And just days after you posted that article, it came out that Taylor Swift gave $100,000 bonus to every truck driver on her tour. And I know, like, in unison, the trucking industry together, we were like, everyone was so excited. Like, what an awesome thing. Yeah, everybody's a Swiftie now. Scott, we're gonna do some Taylor Swift trivia here in just a minute.
Great.
But I know that, all carriers don't have that kind of, maybe they don't have that kind of option to say, oh, I'm going to give $100,000 bonus to every driver. Listen, maybe they do. Okay. I'm not, whatever. And so, but I know that every carrier today can't necessarily do that. But what type of, how can they take a page from her script? You know what I mean? Like, how can they say, I'm going to reward my drivers in a pretty cool, crazy way? Like, what are some ways that you think they can maybe take a page out of Taylor Swift's script there?
Yeah, well, I am thinking about that. Like, I was thinking, what are gifts, and what is, what type of gift is well received, or, met with a lot of graciousness. And typically, like you said, anything that's extraordinary or over the top. In this case, Taylor Swift has a lot more money than she does time or access. It's not really,
Mm-hmm.
Taylor Swift can't individually or safely, convene all of her drivers and grant them time, but she has resources. And so she gave the resources. In the event that you don't have resources, while those are always good, and I think you could scale any of that, whether it's 100,000 or 10,000. I have seen carriers make some very large, gifts to their employees in certain times a year to celebrate certain things. But what stuck out to me is that a lot of carriers or a lot of executives or companies have time. And I think we sometimes forget or discount the value of that time. So whether it's PTO in a particular time or place that is of significant value to that driver. Whether I realize that not everybody can take off the week of Christmas, but if you could identify, that a driver's, kid's birthday or graduation, or if you could make some sort of grand gesture around allowing, those drivers some sort of time in that way, or time with executives. I know that there's a large carrier here based in Arkansas where they bring in, X percent of their drivers, and they put them in with, the president of the company or the owner of the company, and, thank them, appropriately, but also give them that time and that recognition to acknowledge the sacrifices that they make. And so anyway, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but when I think about ways to give, there's resources. But if not resources, then you can give time or experiences, and sometimes that may require a little bit of effort or legwork to figure out what it is that's of value to your employees. I bet that for less than $100,000 an employee, you could find something that would really make their day.
Yes.
That's really good. Really good. So I have to ask, so were you a Taylor Swift fan before you went? And if you weren't, are you a Taylor Swift fan after?
So yes, I'm a big Taylor Swift fan. Just from I'm a pop music girl in the first place, but in that space, big Taylor Swift fan. I also have two teenagers, and so that certainly amplifies my interest and exposure to Taylor Swift. And we had the best. I have a boy and a girl. They're both young teenagers, and we went to Kansas City to the concert there and had a fantastic time. The show is everything that it's hyped up to be. And then I came back and wrote about the logistical feat that it actually is to pull off something of that scale. You know it once when you see it, you think obviously it takes 100 trucks to move this set, and there's got to be more than one set because they're playing simultaneously all the time. And so the logistical feat of pulling off something like that with the lights and the staging and all of the people and equipment, that was the logistics tie to work it into the upfront column of the Arkansas Trucking Report.
Yeah, that was great. It was great.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I had seen so many videos of actually dads taking their girls to concerts, and there were shirts that said Swift Dads and all this kind of stuff. And so many of the videos and things that I saw were dads saying, "Well, I didn't really come here knowing what to expect, but I left a huge fan." So I thought that was great. And I'm sure at Arrowhead, which is always known to be a loud stadium during football season, I can't imagine how loud it was when she performed. I'm sure it was ringing in your ears for a couple of days.
It was, but in a good way.
Good. Fantastic. Fantastic.
That's so fun. Well, she's definitely won the hearts of lots of folks in trucking, I know, as of late. So that was really cool that she did that. So, well, cool. Well, Shannon, thank you so much for your time today. This was awesome. We appreciate you and just your insight and just hearing, what you've learned over the years. And I even took a couple notes on, I love your thoughts of translating the way we look at bringing in young drivers to females. I had not thought of that before, and I think that's a great way to kind of look at that and translate that into those needs as well. So thank you again for your time. I know you're busy, and you've got a lot going on. So we appreciate you joining us. And we look forward to next time we get to chat.
Thank you for having me. This was a fun and different podcast and audience. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you,
All
Shannon.
right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
All right, Priscilla, it's that time of the show because we call our show The Resource. We want to make sure that we provide you with resources and information that has recently caught our eye and that will help you maybe recruit smarter and retain better. So, Priscilla, what do you got for us today?
Listen, I need more full applications. Like I know right now I don't need to hire necessarily a ton of drivers because of the way that freight is for me, but I need to get to those full apps faster because maybe my recruiting team isn't as big as it used to be, or things just look a little different. So like efficiency. So I was talking to what we call our innovation team, like the really smart folks that work for us that develop all of our technology. And I said, listen, I know we're helping people do that, but like, what's the data behind that? Like, what is? And he was like, oh, let me just tell you. And so this I thought was so interesting. So on average, and you might not realize this, but on average, a good recruiter, like a good solid, I don't want to say average, a good solid recruiter is going to convert 8 to 10% of the short forms that are assigned to them to full applications. About 8 to 10%. But when you throw in technology, I'm not even saying it necessarily has to be ours. Like throw in there's technology that you can use to help you get to the full app faster that doesn't require as many humans. Okay? I mean, I'm just being honest, the way technology is today, we can nurture leads in such a way that it gets to the full app faster, while sometimes recruiters are working on doing those final things to close the driver to get them ready for orientation and all of those things. And so that when you use technology, like for example, when you use Lead Assist, which is the technology that we have, it converts 20 to 40% of short forms to full apps. So that's almost double what a good solid recruiter does. So if you're saying, hey, how do I become more efficient in my recruiting department that might be a little lean right now? Get some technology behind what you're doing. Like it's a difference in 8 to 10% short forms getting to full apps per recruiter versus 20%, 20 to 40, which is double. So I thought that was an interesting data point that I kind of ran into lately. What do you got?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was having a conversation with a new customer that we brought on probably about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and we were kind of looking at their data. And one of the things that popped up was equipment assignment issues. And this is something that at PDA we've really looked at for the last few years. And one of the things that we saw in that is really that is the first impression that carriers make on a driver. So the drivers come through orientation, they get assigned a truck, and that truck is going to be their home and it's going to be their workplace. And so it's really the first impression. And actually, I think we did a question on that on a couple surveys ago, where we asked the driver, what does the state of your truck say to you, or what does that mean to you from when you get assigned that truck? And I think it was something like 60 to 70% said it was an indication of how that carrier felt about them as a driver and as a person. And so when I was looking at our Q2 data, we had 31% of drivers, equipment was the top issue. And 26% or 23%, I'm sorry, of those drivers mentioned equipment assignment. And so what we look at and what we define as equipment assignment literally is at the time of assignment or any time in that first week. And so that's your first impression. And to kind of bring that kind of full circle, this customer that I was talking with, and we were going through their data and looking, okay, what are some of the things that we can improve? What are some of the things that we can do to better retain our drivers? Is their equipment assignment issues were top on all of their tractor issues. And when we looked at the data behind those drivers that had voluntarily left in the last 6 weeks, 60% of those drivers had equipment assignment issues.
Oh,
And
wow.
so when you make that first impression on a driver, um, with that truck, and it's a truck that hasn't been properly inspected, it hasn't been properly detailed, it's dirty, it's nasty, maybe it still has the previous driver's belongings still in it, you are already off on the wrong foot with that driver. And so talk with the shop, make sure they're inspecting those trucks, make sure they're cleaning and detailing those trucks, because when a driver gets in it, it's one of the first things that they notice about you as a carrier. And it's one of the first things that they think about how you feel about them is how and what state that truck is in when you assign it to them.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a good takeaway. That seems like everybody would be like, duh. But at the end of the day, I mean, even we see it happen. And so when you think about, sometimes like just the condition of the truck that they get but it's critical. It's critical from a retention standpoint. So that's great. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, it was
So
great.
this was good. There's a lot of meat here. We're rocking and rolling here. So thanks for listening to the resource. If you had fun, give us a high five. Leave us a rating or a review on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We got to hear about Scott and the three amigos. We got to keep hearing about that. So why would you not want to subscribe?
It's deep stuff. We go really, really deep when it comes here to the resource. So thank you guys for joining us. If you have any questions or feedback to share, hit us up on social media. You can shoot us an email, and we'll be back in our next episode with some more fun, some data and information to help you in your recruiting and retention game. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.